Hey guys, welcome to this new series that I literally just came up with about 5 minutes ago on my drive back home from drinking boba. So I thought to myself that I've been taking so long writing tutorials that I kind of need some intermediate content that will help give the channel more vibrancy or some more additional content for you guys. So this series is called, I guess I'm going to call it right now, Quora Questions Answered or whatever like that. And pretty much I'm just going to go on the computer programming advice section of Quora. And I'm going to answer questions that I think some beginners might have when it comes to learning how to program or how to get into software dev or finding your first job or whatever that might be. So I don't know what kind of content, what kind of questions are going to come up. And I'm just going to try to answer them in a very genuine and honest fashion. So first question, and sorry if I stutter or whatever, I'm just going to be talking freely here. So okay, so I'm in computer programming advice, and let's see. Okay, am I at a disadvantage if I am not fast at typing code? I don't really know what that question entails. There was a parentheses that says typing code. Okay, so if the question is, am I at a disadvantage because I don't type fast enough when it comes to coding? My answer is you're not, because when you're coding, you don't literally spend the entire time typing. Yes, when you come with implementation, and yes, you might be iterating upon the implementation, but sometimes you have to think about what you're going to do ahead of time. Actually, pretty much all the time. You're going to have to be thinking prior to even starting to write any code. And as you get more and more experience in programming, and as you have more structure in your code, you're going to spend a lot more time planning than you are actually coding, and that actually does save you a bit of time in the long run. So to answer that question in a long story short format, you're not at a disadvantage. The only disadvantage I could see is if you're pair programming and your partner is just really annoyed because you're typing too slow. But that could be fixed because with practice and skills, especially with typing, you're going to pretty much become faster at typing. And it's just a skill that you learn over time. Okay, so that is one question on Quora. We're going to move on to the next question that looks pretty interesting. Okay, here's another question. What advice can you give to new programmers? Okay, let's think about this. My advice to new programmers is try to develop good habits. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of books online that teach you, or a lot of books available in the market that teach you a lot about how to write very clean code. And we might say clean code, but what we really mean by clean code is just code that's really maintainable, easy for other people to read, and easy to follow. And clean code is a good practice and a good thing to learn early on. Of course, when you're starting to learn how to code, you don't have to be very strict upon all these different nuances of your coding style, but over time, as you get more and more experience and you're going to find yourself working with other groups and other people and teams, and you want to be more effective as a team, you really need to have a style or a way of thinking that helps you write your code that other people can just pick up easily and know what you're trying to accomplish. And clean code is a really good habit to develop early on. And I guess that's my advice, because when you develop bad habits, they're a lot harder to break. And especially for me, when I'm trying to tell others to do things in a way that might be a little bit easier for me to understand, or even someone else to pick up, I feel kind of bad to just even bring it up because it tends to conflict with their style, or it might bruise their ego, and that can be really tricky and really challenging. So just long story short, have good habits and develop good clean code methodologies. I suppose that would be the definition of that. So, okay. Hopefully that answers that question. The next question, let's see. I suck at programming, but I love it. What should I do? That is me. I feel like everyone will say that about themselves, because as programmers, we have to be such hard critics on ourselves. And for me especially, I'm a very, very hard critic to myself. And that's probably the only way to truly get better and to really push yourself beyond your limit. So if you think you suck at programming, don't worry. Everyone else thinks they suck at programming as well. But what you really should do is just keep coding and keep programming, and you'll get better and better, and eventually you will probably never say that you're good at programming, because programming entails so many different things. And yes, you might say you're very competent, and that's good, but just learn to not be so hard on yourself and just have fun with it, because programming at the end of the day is a lot about figuring out solutions to problems and creating things that most people dream of and vision of. And programming, you have that free space and that free creativity to do that. So yeah, just keep coding if you love it. Do what you love. At the end of the day, you gotta be happy and you gotta do what you love doing. So that's my advice on that. I'm not gonna give some story or whatever based on my life on that. All right, we're on the fourth question. I think we're on the fourth question. Yes, fourth question. I am a late comer to programming. How much time do I need to spend in order to get a junior web developer job? Okay, that's a tricky question, because obviously you could be a late comer to programming, and that's very subjective and very relative to yourself. You might think because you're 25 years old and you just started programming this year that you're a late comer, or you might be someone who's 40 years old and you're starting to learn how to program and you want to get a junior web developer job. I've seen both ends of the spectrum. For myself, yeah, I might say I'm a late comer to programming when I first started. I think I started coding at 23-ish, and I landed my first junior web developer job, per se. I was a junior web designer / developer at that 23, at the age I started learning how to program. So in that respect, you just need to spend enough time to understand the fundamentals, especially for web dev. You just need to understand a very fundamental aspect on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Sometimes, and in most cases, you can probably even get by with only knowing a little bit of JavaScript, but there will come a time where you do want to have some form of JavaScript experience, especially in the web dev realm, because JavaScript is in pretty much everything in web dev, so you're going to have to need to learn that. But needless to say, you can learn that on the job, and over time, after work, after your first job, during your first junior web developer job, you can be studying, working on those improvements, and learning how to improve on these skill sets. I think, story time, when I was at my first developer job, I would spend a couple hours, 2 to 3 hours, working on learning JavaScript, because I was spending so much time learning HTML and CSS at work, and then I had to bust my butt off to learn a little bit more JavaScript. And that just requires picking up a book and just going through the tutorials, watching videos on it, and just trying to create fun programs as you code. Okay, next question. And this is going to be the last question because I want this series to be pretty short. Let's see, what is a good question here? Okay, here we go. What should a programmer never put on his resume? Okay, this is very subjective, and that's based on a lot of hiring standards. I know that a lot of people like to work the resume system, and they do that by putting a bunch of keywords, buzzwords, and all that stuff, because that gets you an interview in the front door. Now, that's a good strategy, and I would say, yes, maybe you could do that, but for my personal belief and my opinion, based on the interviews that I've done, I would kind of not recommend doing that unless you can truthfully answer questions relative or in relation to those things that you list on there. Because as an interviewer, I'm going to try my hardest to see how well you know these things. And if I'm hiring you based on this particular skill set and you don't know it, it can be very tricky, because then you put me in a tough situation. And being honest is important, because that's a character that's a character that I follow, and that's something that I truly believe in, so that when you're at your job, people don't view you as this dishonest person, and that they can trust you, and that your teamwork and your synergy as a team will flourish, I suppose. So in that regards, I mean, this is a very subjective question, but I would say just put things that you're comfortable with saying, comfortable that you have some level of competency to, like at least a very fundamental to a beginner to even an intermediate level, depending on what job you're applying for. And don't lie about things you don't know, because if you get called out on that in an interview, that can look really bad. And no one really wants to work with someone who might be very dishonest. I know I don't. So, okay, just for the sake of answering another question, because that was kind of really interesting. Let's see another question here. Well, that's not relevant to me. Which programming language is overrated? I don't want to answer that. What advice can you give to new programmers? Already answer that. Man, people are asking the same question. Wait, these are just answers to it. Okay, here's a funny random question. My boyfriend is a programmer, but he never fixes my computer. What's the deal? Yeah, there's a big difference between an IT person and a programmer. I would say like some programmers do have at least a bare level of competency into doing and fixing a bunch of IT related problems, but putting that expectation on your boyfriend to begin with just because his job entails something related to computers is kind of unfair. If you were, I don't know, a finance major or a finance person, analyst or something for a company, I would not expect you as my significant other to be balancing my checkbook or to be who uses a checkbook, balancing my budget. Okay, first of all, so that's kind of a little unfair. First of all, to your boyfriend, but on top of that, that's just because you do that on your job doesn't mean it relates in that sense, I suppose. And programmers obviously aren't IT people. But yeah, so anywho, that's enough Quora questions. Hopefully you guys enjoy that series. I'm sorry I stumbled or whatever in any of my answers, but if you like this series, if you like this, and whatever you want to call this, just please hit a like, hit a comment, and give me some other recommendations of things that I can try out. And thank you so much, guys. I hope you guys have a great code day and enjoy the rest of your